Thank you so much for being here. Really excited to tell you guys a little bit more. I think it's very timely to have this presentation after the previous one because it really helps contextualize a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today. All right, so just to get started, when we think about where we stand today, kind of towards hopefully the end of COVID, COVID has really had a big impact on a lot of industries. And the fashion industry is one that has not been spared by this impact. And it's had a lot of changes in terms of both how businesses are thinking as well as how consumers are thinking. And when you think about the shifting landscape within the fashion industry, you can start picking out certain major trends that have really been impacted by COVID. And these are trends that were already kind of accelerating or happening before COVID, but as a result of COVID, have actually become permanent changes in how both consumers think as well as how businesses think. And according to McKinsey and the Business of Fashion, these trends of sustainability, personalization, and localization, which I'm going to unpack in a little bit more detail as we go on, are permanent changes in how consumers think. And so it's really important for any player within the fashion industry or any industry that's adjacent to that to start thinking about how these are going to impact what they're doing. And I'm going to give, I think, a good example of an example that we have used to implement in the eyewear industry in our case. So going to sustainability and thinking about signals of change. So 32% of US consumers prioritize companies that are actively reducing their impact on the environment. That is actually something that is continuously growing over the last 5 years. That number has grown quite a bit and is accelerating due to COVID. The next point that I think is really interesting is that consumers are starting to not buy products that are not taking sustainability into account. So rather than it being a factor that is driving a consumer to actually make a purchasing decision, it's also starting to become table stakes for any company that actually wants to be considered by a growing group of consumers. The last one is that consumers are willing to pay more. And so from a pure commercial standpoint, there's a very direct incentive to start thinking about this because consumers are actually opening their wallets and willing to spend more money on products that are taking sustainability into account. The next signal of change I want to talk about is personalization. So personalization is really thinking about systems that allow for personalization to happen in a more seamless way. So one of the big trends that I think many of you may be aware of is the massive explosion in the increase in variety when it comes to shopping for fashion. It's something that the previous talk talked a lot about, how fashion cycles have shortened, and as a result of that, there are so many SKUs. And one of the big challenges to solve for is how do you create a system that allows consumers to access lots of SKUs without creating an extremely complex system? And this is something that ultimately leads to higher conversion with sales. It also is something that ties into other adjacent trends that are happening when you think about personalization in the context of the fact that you have consumers that are thinking more about diversity in terms of ethnicity. You think about more diversity in terms of fit, and that being something that is top of mind for consumers. And the last one being variety, which we talked about a little bit already. But consumers wanting to feel like when they're buying something that really took into account who they are, what they stand for, what their values are, what they do in their daily life. And I think a statistic that really hit home for me is 88% of marketers seeing measurable improvements when it comes to marketing products that are more sustainable, and something that I'm sure many people in the audience over here today have thought about or are thinking about. The last one is localization. Localization is an interesting one because this one was really galvanized by COVID from a business standpoint. Consumers were already moving in the direction of starting to think about how they would prefer to buy products that are made close to them or that are made somewhere where they can actually go see the people who are making the product. Businesses, especially in the fashion industry, were really kind of laid bare by COVID in the sense that supply chains got halted, and a lot of new production cycles were slowed down a lot. And we're still kind of seeing that play out today. There's basically been an unprecedented urgency for developing more localized solutions when it comes to the fashion industry. And consumers are also willing to pay more for products that are made locally. And finally, what you're seeing is that even mass market brands are starting to think about localization, whereas previously localization was something that was typically, especially in the West, something only high-end brands could think about. And the business models that localization is driving are really, really interesting because supply chains are complex and long, and the typical supply chains that we use today haven't really changed much in the last 20 or 30 years. And so there's a lot of different business model opportunities that come into play when it comes to localization. So with that kind of context, I'm going to tell you a little bit about King Children. That's a company that I founded, and a little bit about what we do and how we really are thinking through all of these different changes that are happening and building a business model that addresses them in a holistic way. One of the things that I am a very, very strong believer in, it's something that I speak about a lot, is that to solve big problems like the one that we're facing right now in the fashion industry, when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to localization, comes to customization, you have to rethink the whole business model sometimes. You can't just change little bits and components of it, because when you do that, you're not actually capturing the most amount of value that you can in terms of delivering on what you set out to do. So just to talk to you a little bit about King Children and who we are, we think of ourselves fundamentally as an industrial innovation company that is focused on building the future of eyewear. And what that means to us is we have 4 core values and pillars by which we've really built this company out. The first is sustainability, the second is technology, the third is performance, and the fourth is design. And with these 4 pillars, when you bring them together, you really see us addressing a lot of the challenges that we just talked about, and also creating a new business model in the fashion industry broadly, and definitely in the eyewear industry, which is one of the least innovative parts of the fashion industry. And so talking about sustainability, in the traditional fashion industry, in the traditional eyewear industry specifically, for every pair of eyewear that's sold, approximately 14 pairs worth of material is wasted. I'm not talking about waste that's coming from you throwing your eyewear away. I'm talking about waste that's created in the supply chain. So our head of design formerly headed design for the 3rd largest eyewear company in the world. And when I first met her and spoke to her, she explained to me that she literally had been signing off on millions of pairs of eyewear being destroyed every single year, and that was part of the business model. It's something that we have heard about. You know, H&M has $4 billion of inventory that's lying in warehouses that is going to be thrown out. Just recently in the UK, Amazon, this is not a fashion industry example, but it just speaks to the broader trend that we have in how supply chains have been developed. Amazon was called out for destroying hundreds of millions of dollars of product every year at one of their warehouses in the UK. And so in our model, what we've done is we've broken down the 2 biggest components that contribute to this. The first is production waste. So the actual waste that occurs while making a product. In the case of eyewear, acetate eyewear, which is the most popular and common high-end material for eyewear, the production process itself is one in which 80% of the material that's put in ends up becoming waste. And that's quite shocking to a lot of people. But if you look at a video of how a pair of eyewear is made, it's basically carved out of a block of acetate, and everything that is being carved out ends up becoming waste, and in many cases ends up becoming microplastic waste in the oceans. The second major reason that you have so much waste in the industry is inventory. So when you think about it, all of us have faces that are so different in terms of shape and size. Trends in the eyewear industry change so fast that in order to make sure that that pair of eyewear that is being manufactured gets to a customer's face that likes it, the industry has developed a model where they just overproduce everything, hoping that there's enough of a product available to a customer when they walk into a store or they go online to have something that they like. And unfortunately, this entire approach has been crystallized in the business model of how it works. It's not viewed as something that is a problem. It's viewed as the status quo and how the industry actually functions. The eyewear industry, I would say, is worse than a lot of the other fashion industry, but these numbers, the idea that more products are not sold than sold, in the case of the eyewear industry, 2 out of every 3 pairs of eyewear that are made are not sold, that's not actually that unusual, even when you think about other parts of the fashion industry. The next aspect that I want to talk about is personalization. So in the case of King Children, what we've done is we've thought about personalization in a lot of different ways. We have an AR app that you can use to 3D scan your face and actually custom fit a pair of eyewear to your exact facial structure. That entirely eliminates this idea of sizing, and that's become one of the things that's really kind of helped people understand and appreciate the power of what we can do. And would love for any of you to download our app. It's an iOS app, and try it out for yourself, where you can 3D scan your face and then visualize a product that's fit to your facial structure, powered by our technology. This also extends beyond just fit to also variety. Because our entire production system is on demand and additive based, what we can do is we can create SKUs that don't exist, but that customers can see, try on. This actually connects to the previous talk as well, where you can actually try something on in AR that doesn't exist, so you get a sense of what it looks like, and then ultimately decide if you want it or not. At a brand level, when we partner with brands, this means that a brand can have hundreds of SKUs on a platform that we create with them and offer that to their consumers, and have just one piece of each SKU, which they use to create content with, for example, and then see what's selling and what's not selling. And then if products are not selling, they can just discontinue them. If a certain design is selling, a certain colorway is selling, they can immediately ramp up the number of variety and offerings that they have in that design or colorway. And what this allows you to do is it starts allowing you to create really personalized shopping experiences for your customers, which, as we looked at earlier, ultimately also ends up driving conversion. The last is localization. So when you think about localization in the model that we use in the eyewear industry, it's one where we've created microfactories. So rather than having massive factories that result in the need for very long supply chains, what we've done is we've created factories that are so small that the footprint is 2,500 square feet. So you can start localizing the production to the different markets that you're serving. And what that does is it helps consumers feel a connection to the product because they know the product is being made somewhere close to them. It also starts drastically reducing your carbon footprint, because when you're making a product close to the consumer, you don't have to ship it halfway around the world. And in our case, when it comes to a single pair of eyewear that we make and sell, our carbon footprint is 7% of what the traditional eyewear industries is, when you add up all the benefits of localization combined with no inventory and reduced resources that are going into producing wasted materials. So just to contextualize this, we often go to the UN Sustainable Development Goals to help think about what we're doing. It helps us understand the broader perspective. The SDGs are, I think, a great framework when it comes to thinking about what kinds of business models need to be built for the future. And it's something that I would encourage you all to think about in your own businesses and how you can think about longer-term sustainable development goals and how you can adapt your business model to take advantage of them. Because what we find is that these are not only better for the planet, they're also better for consumers, they're also better for our businesses. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on them, but these are the 6 sustainable development goals that we think about a lot that our business is solving for. With that, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about the platform and then give you some examples. So our solution is full stack and integrated, which means that we develop the technology all the way from conceptualizing the product, designing the product, to producing the product, to finally getting it in consumers' hands. And that reimagination of the entire supply chain is what allows us to unlock all the benefits that we've talked about today. And ultimately, the model that we use is we have our own brand, which is King Children, but we focus majorly on partnering with existing brands, both digitally native brands as well as heritage brands, to launch collections with them that are powered by our technology platform. One of our core beliefs is that when we develop a system like this that can truly transform an entire industry, in our case, the eyewear industry, it's something that needs to be available at scale so that over time, every single player within the industry can have access to it and start taking advantage of the technology that's developed. And that's why we have what we call a product as a service model, where a brand can basically partner with us and launch an entire collection that's powered by our technology. The last piece is the marketplace piece, where the app itself that we have with the custom fit technology is something that we're now working to create in such a way where different brands that we're powering will all be able to sell their products custom fit. Because when you move over to this very flexible supply chain, it unlocks and opens the possibility to start even creating pieces where each piece is created for each individual consumer. Just to give you a brand partnership case study, which talks also about the value proposition that brands get by partnering with us. So with our platform, when we work with a brand, we find that there's less than 25% upfront commitment because we don't have mold costs. We don't have costs of locking into material that ultimately will end up going waste in a lot of cases. The second is that we can actually design products in so many SKU varieties, from sizing to colorway, because we can algorithmically manipulate our products as they are predominantly digital and produced digitally. And so that means that if you have a product that's selling, you can add sizes of that product on the fly. You can, like I mentioned earlier, add colorways of the product on the fly. The inventory commitment point is huge because when you have such a small inventory commitment, it allows you to start being much more adventurous with your offerings as well. And that allows you to get creative in terms of actually creating those conversions with customers that may be niches, but when you add them all up, they constitute a very large audience. And the last one, which I'm very proud of, is the time to market. So in the traditional eyewear industry, it takes 18 months to launch a new collection. With our platform, we've already brought that down to 3 to 4 months, and we envision that we'll be able to actually bring that down to less than a month to launch an entirely new collection of offerings. And that's something that really changes how, in the eyewear industry, you can think about the product itself and what it means and how you market it to consumers. The next section that I want to go to is a case study of a partnership that we did with Argentinian soccer player, Paulo Dybala. He is, a youth icon, I would say, for the world. He's one of the most followed people on social media, with, I think, over 40 million followers on Instagram. And we really wanted to launch our platform in a way that helped young people also start thinking about business models that are going to be necessary moving forward. And so we launched our first major collaboration with Paulo Dybala. And I want to just show you a video that I'm going to have queued up right now. Sorry about that. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Cool. So this is the product that we developed. What was really cool is we basically spent a lot of time with him to understand exactly what his preferences are, what he likes, and we were able to take all of that and distill it into a design. And because we have no limitations when it comes to design, since we use a digital manufacturing process, we were able to create an actual product that would have been impossible to make using traditional production technology. We were able to create it in a way that it was a limited edition product, which is also very much tying into the trend around how products are marketed today, and something that also captured his values in a product itself. And what was really powerful was it turned into a campaign where his fans were basically doing the Z, which is standing for a zero-waste future, and generated tons and tons of awareness around using business models that are waste-free. And this really has served for us as a very powerful starting point in terms of how we can help consumers also understand the need for business models to change and for our supply chains to be reinvented. Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm happy to answer any questions.